The heating bill for November was $482. That's the thing about these two-story colonials in upstate New York. They look great from the street, but as soon as it hits 40 degrees, the whole place just becomes a wind tunnel. I spent most of Tuesday, or maybe it was Wednesday. I can't remember. Maya had volleyball practice itching to find where the draft was coming from. I was literally walking around the hallway with a candle, watching the flame flicker by the baseboards. My socks were practically frozen. Mark didn't even notice. He was in the kitchen, just scrolling through emails and drinking the coffee I made. He didn't look up when I walked in. He just asked if we had any more of that organic creamer he likes. I told him we were out and I'd hit Target later. He didn't say thanks. He just kind of grunted and went back to his phone. I work in HR for a logistics company in the city. Basically, my whole job is just dealing with other people's disasters. I spend 8 hours a day listening to managers complain about problem employees or explaining health insurance deductibles to people who aren't listening. I'm the one who fixes things quietly so the company doesn't get sued. It's a lot. It's a weird feeling, you know? Being the emotional support for 300 people at work, then coming home and feeling like background noise in your own house. Anyway, when I got home the other day, the house was quiet. Maya was still at practice, and Mark was supposedly in his office working on some proposal. I started on the laundry. I have this thing where I have to fold clothes the second they come out of the dryer. Otherwise, the pile just grows until it takes over the guest room. I was folding Mark's dress shirts, those expensive Egyptian cotton ones that are a pain to iron. I saw a little note tucked into the pocket of one of his charcoal blazers. I didn't open it right away. I just looked at it. It was on heavy cream cardstock, not the kind of scrap paper we have in the kitchen. I just left it on the table and went to start dinner. I made lemon chicken and asparagus. While I was chopping the vegetables, I kept thinking about the notice the Hoa sent about our hedges. They wanted them trimmed another 2 inches. I spent a good chunk of my afternoon worrying about hedges. I was looking for the garlic press in the utility drawer. That drawer is a disaster. It's just rubber bands, old pizza coupons from a place that closed years ago, and a bunch of dead batteries. Mark refuses to throw away because he thinks they still have a little juice. I spent like 5 minutes digging through that junk before I found the press. I don't know. I just wondered why I spend so much time organizing a life that no one else seems to care about. Also, the light bulb in the pantry was flickering again, which was just annoying. When Mark finally came out of his office, he looked exhausted. He does this long theatrical sigh that basically tells me his day was way harder than mine. He sat down, ate the chicken, and spent 15 minutes complaining about how his boss can't delegate. I just listened. I asked the right questions. I did the supportive spouse thing, kind of like how I handle exit interviews at work. "Did you get the creamer?" he asked. "Yeah, it's in the fridge," I said. Cool, that was it. That was the whole conversation about my day. He didn't ask about the crisis I had with the warehouse supervisor or the migraine I'd texted him about at 2:00. He just ate and checked his watch. After dinner, he went to shower. I went back to the laundry room to finish the shirts and picked up that note. It wasn't long. Just a few lines in this looping, confident handwriting. It mentioned a hotel in the city, one with the rooftop bar Mark always calls two tourists and a date from 3 weeks ago. I didn't get angry. I was just curious. In HR, you're trained to get your facts together before you accuse anyone. So I didn't scream or run into the bathroom. I just felt this cold clarity. It's the same feeling I get when I find a mistake in a payroll report. Just a quiet realization that something is wrong. I started thinking about the last 6 months. The late nights during quarterly reviews. How he suddenly started taking his phone into the bathroom. The passwords. I told myself I was just being paranoid. I thought maybe we were just in a dry spell because of the mortgage and Maya's tuition. I just played the part of the stable wife who keeps everything running. I suddenly felt the need to clean. Not like a normal cleaning, but like a deep, aggressive scrub. I started in the guest room. We basically use that room as a storage locker for stuff we can't throw away. old textbooks, a broken vacuum, Christmas lights from 2019. I spent 2 hours moving boxes. I was sweating, even with the draft. I moved some old photo albums and some National Geographics from the 90s. Then, in the back of the closet, behind a suitcase he used for a Chicago trip years ago, I saw it. A small black leather briefcase. Not his work bag. This one was older and had a combination lock. It was covered in dust. I remembered seeing it once when we first moved in, but he told me it was just old files from his last job. I sat on the floor with the bag in my lap. Mark isn't creative. With passwords, it's always our anniversary or the dog's name. I tried the anniversary. Nothing. Maya's birthday. Nothing. Then I just tried the address of the first apartment we rented in Albany. The lock clicked. I didn't open it immediately. I just sat there in the dark, listening to the shower running upstairs and the TV in the living room. I felt kind of detached, like I was watching this happen to someone else. I thought about the lemon chicken, the heating bill, and the organic creamer. I opened the lid. It wasn't just files. There were envelopes, a second phone, and a stack of photos. I didn't move for a long time. I just looked at them, and I started thinking about how much a divorce lawyer costs and how much was left in our joint savings. I just left the bag open on the floor. I didn't even have time to close the briefcase before I heard the floorboards creak upstairs. Mark was out of the shower. I heard the bathroom door click, and then the sound of him getting dressed. I just sat there on the guest room carpet, with the photos spread out in front of me. I felt kind of numb. I wasn't even that shocked, honestly. It was more like when you've suspected your roof has a leak for months, and then you finally see the water stain on the ceiling. You aren't surprised it's raining. You're just annoyed that you have to deal with the mess. When he walked in, he didn't ask what I was doing. He just saw the briefcase, and his whole vibe changed. He didn't look guilty, he looked offended. He was still in his navy bathrobe with a towel around his neck, just standing in the doorway. "What the hell are you doing in here, Grace?" he asked. He didn't sound sorry. He sounded like he was talking to someone who'd messed up a report at his office. I didn't look up. I just pointed at the photos. "Who is she, Mark?" He didn't say anything for a while. Then he did that thing where he lets out this big, dramatic sigh and walked over to the briefcase. He just snapped the lid shut. "It's not what you think," he said. "I've heard that line 1,000 times in HR disputes. It basically means it's exactly what you think. Those are old. Most of that stuff is from years ago. I forgot it was even in here. It's basically an archive." An archive," I said. I finally looked at him. He looked older in that dim light, I guess. "The note in your blazer mentioned a hotel 3 weeks ago. I don't think archives send current reservations to your pockets." Then his face shifted. He stopped acting confused and started doing that thing where he makes me feel like I'm the one with the problem. He told me I'd been on edge lately. He said the stress of the logistics company was getting to me, and that I was becoming obsessive. He even brought up how I've been scrubbing the house and organizing drawers, saying it was a sign that I was spiraling. "You're projecting your own unhappiness onto me," he told me. He got all calm and condescending. "We've both been struggling, Grace, but instead of talking to me like an adult, you're sneaking around the guest room like a private investigator." It's honestly a little disturbing. I just listened. In my head, I was basically doing a performance review. Employee is deflective, shifting blame, avoiding the actual question. I didn't cry or argue. I actually started wondering if the hotel he went to had a gym because I'd been meaning to start jogging again. "I'm going to bed," he said. He sounded exhausted, like my instability was just too much for him. He walked out and left me there in the dust. I stayed on the floor for another 20 minutes, just staring at the spot where the briefcase had been. I didn't know what to say, so I just didn't. The next morning was just the usual routine. I woke up at 6:15, made Maya's lunch turkey sandwich, carrots, granola bar, and told her to remember her knee pads for practice. Mark was in the kitchen with his coffee and his tablet. He didn't even look at me. He acted like the guest room thing never happened, or like it was some dream we both agreed to forget. On the drive to work, I started thinking about our 401k. We have a joint account, but Mark always handled the investments. He told me it was too boring for me to worry about, and for 15 years I just believed him. I can handle the day-to-day stuff, payroll, insurance budgets, but he did the long-term growth. I started wondering if that growth was going somewhere else. When I got to the office, I went to the break room first. I stood there for a minute, staring at the coffee machine. It's one of those industrial ones that always smells like burnt beans and old milk. I tried to get a cup, but the machine was jammed and there was this little pool of brown liquid leaking onto the counter. I spent 5 minutes trying to wipe it up with those thin, recycled paper towels that just smear the mess around. I remember thinking the company is wasting money on these towels and they should just buy the heavy-duty ones from the warehouse. It was a stupid thing to be mad about, but it was the only thing I felt like I could actually fix. Once I got to my desk, I just went into work mode. I didn't have Mark's private passwords, but I had the joint logins. I spent my lunch break pulling statements from the last 2 years. I didn't look at the big totals, I just looked for things that didn't fit. I think it was a Tuesday, or maybe Wednesday, because Maya had a game that night. Anyway, I started seeing patterns. Small charges, 50 or $100 here, and there too boutiques and restaurants in Manhattan. Then there were the bigger ones. Every few months, $2,000 would go to an account I didn't recognize. I didn't feel sad. It was more like a math problem. I started a spreadsheet on a private drive and called it Project Audit. I listed everything: the charges, the trips, the late nights at the office that matched hotel dates. I was basically auditing my own marriage. While I was doing it, I kept thinking about the house. The way the windows rattle when it's windy. We spent $40,000 on a kitchen remodel 3 years ago just to have a waterfall island that we barely use. We had this expensive shell of a life, and I was the one polishing the glass while the foundation was rotting. I found a charge from October for a gold bracelet with a diamond chip. I'd asked Mark for one for my birthday that year, and he told me things were tight because of the mortgage and Maya's tuition. He gave me a card and some fancy bath bombs from the mall. I remember thinking it was sweet that he remembered. I liked the lavender ones. I just stared at the screen for a long time. I wondered if the woman was like meditated, feeling unimportant, just wanting to be seen. Or maybe she was younger. Maybe she didn't care about the HOA, or the heating bills, or the way the dishwasher leaks if you put too many plates in the top rack. I went home that evening and just played along. I asked about his day. I listened to him complain about his boss. I made that pasta with the cream sauce he likes. I watched him eat and wondered how someone can look so normal while lying like that. He mentioned our summer vacation and suggested we go back to the Cape. That sounds lovely, I said. I didn't really feel anything. I just wondered if he was planning to take her, or if he'd figured out a way to schedule us both. He smiled at me, and I noticed the smile didn't even reach his eyes. He was just managing me. It was exactly what I do with problem employees at work: keep them calm, make them feel heard, but don't actually give them any power. That night, after Maya went to bed, I went back into the guest room. The briefcase was gone. He'd moved it. I didn't go looking for it, though. I didn't need the photos anymore. I had the numbers. Numbers don't try to convince you that you're spiraling. I lay in bed listening to him breathe next to me. I thought about the 401k and how the savings were slowly bleeding out. I started calculating what I could get if I filed for divorce. I thought about how much a lawyer would cost. I remembered this trip we took to a cabin in the Adirondacks when we first started dating. I think it was November, maybe December, because there was some snow on the trees. We spent the whole weekend talking about the future. He told me I was the anchor of his life, the thing that kept him grounded. I thought it was romantic then. Now it just sounded like I was the weight that kept him from drifting away while he went off to do whatever he wanted. I didn't sleep much. I just watched the shadows of the tree branches on the ceiling. I thought about the draft in the hallway and the way the candle flickered. I realized I didn't want to fix the draft anymore. I didn't want to trim the hedges or buy the organic creamer. I just wanted to know how much of the house was actually mine. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm and started the coffee. While the machine was bubbling, I looked at the calendar on the fridge. Maya had a game Friday, dinner with the Millers on Saturday. The Millers are those perfect people from three houses down, finance jobs, and a perfectly groomed golden retriever. I wondered if they had a briefcase in their guest room, too. I wondered if their house was also a wind tunnel. Mark walked in, yawning. He leaned over and kissed my cheek. It was just a habit after 20 years. I didn't pull away, but I didn't lean in either. I stood there for a minute smelling the burnt coffee. "Do we have any more of those granola bars for Maya?" he asked. "In the pantry," I said. Right next to the flickering light bulb, he didn't even notice the tone. He just grunted and went to find the bars. I watched him walk away and I felt, I don't know, a kind of cold peace. I wasn't the anchor anymore. I was just waiting for the right time to move. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees over the weekend, and the draft in the hallway became an actual current of air that could knock a piece of paper off the console table. I spent Saturday morning trying to wedge a rolled-up towel against the gap under the front door, but it kept sliding away every time Maya ran in and out with her volleyball gear. It was a mindless, frustrating task, but it gave me something to do with my hands, while my mind was busy calculating the exact trajectory of my life's collapse. I had spent the previous few nights staring at my project audit spreadsheet. The numbers were cold and objective, which is why I liked them. They didn't lie, and they didn't try to gaslight me by telling me I was spiraling. ID discovered that Mark wasn't just spending a few $100s here and there. He had been systematically diverting funds from our joint brokerage account into a separate high-yield savings account that I didn't have access to. He'd been doing it for 3 years. The amount was staggering. It wasn't just dinner and drinks money. It was down payment on a condo money. I think it was a Thursday, or maybe Friday, because the trash pickup was the next morning. Regardless, I found the key to the second email account. Mark is a creature of habit, and he uses the same root password for everything, just with different suffixes. He thought he was being clever by adding a special character at the end, but he's the kind of man who thinks a complex password is just adding an exclamation point to the end of his favorite sports team's city. Logging into that account felt like stepping into a room I wasn't supposed to be in, even though the room was built with my own money. The emails weren't just romantic, they were a curated version of a life I didn't recognize. He was writing to a woman named Sarah. I don't know who she was at first. Maybe a coworker, maybe someone from his old firm, but the way he spoke to her was entirely different from the way he spoke to me. With me, Mark is the exhausted provider, the man burdened by the weight of his career and the needs of the family. With Sarah, he was an adventurer. He told her about the suffocating nature of his suburban existence. He complained about the HOA, the mortgage, and the endless cycle of school practices and dinner rotations. He described our Hamath colonial we had spent 15 years paying for and decorating as a beautiful cage. I read a thread from last November, right around the time the heating bills spiked. While I was walking around the house with a candle, trying to find the leak in the walls, Mark was emailing Sarah about a weekend trip they'd taken to a boutique hotel in the Catskills. He told her that she was the only thing that made him feel alive again. He told her that he felt like a different person when he was with her, someone who wasn't just a set of responsibilities. I remember looking at the lemon chicken I'd made that night. I remember how he'd complained that the asparagus was a little too soft. I just sat there in the dim light of my home office, reading his words on the screen, and I felt this strange hollow sensation in my chest. It wasn't exactly a heartbreak implies something that was once whole and then broke. This felt more like discovering a structural flaw in a building that had been leaning for years. I got distracted for a while by the kitchen sink. The garbage disposal had been making this guttural, grinding sound for 3 days, and I finally decided to deal with it. I spent 45 minutes on my hands and knees with a flashlight and a pair of pliers, trying to fish out a piece of plastic that had somehow gotten lodged in the blade. My knuckles were scraped, and there was a puddle of gray, smelling water soaking into my leggings. I remember feeling an intense, irrational hatred for the disposal. I wanted to rip the whole thing out of the counter and throw it onto the lawn. I stood there for a minute, dripping with sink water, wondering why I was the only one in this house who knew how to fix things. Once I dried off and got back to the computer, I found the photos. He'd used a cloud storage folder to share images with her. There were hundreds of them. They weren't just selfies, they were photos of them doing things Mark had told me he was too tired to do. They were hiking in places I'd suggested years ago. They were at galleries in the city. They were laughing in restaurants, where the lighting was soft and the wine was expensive. In the photos, Mark looked younger. He looked lighter. He wasn't wearing the face of an exhausted husband. He was leaning into her, his eyes focused on her in a way he hadn't looked at me in a decade. And then I found the messages where they talked about the future. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning an exit. They had a timeline. They talked about the transition. Mark had been calculating how to move enough money into the secret account to support them both once he finally freed himself. He discussed the logistics of the divorce. How he would frame it as a mutual parting of ways, how he would make sure I was taken care of so that I wouldn't fight him for the house. He actually used the word manage when talking about how he would handle my reaction. She's stable, he'd written to Sarah. She'll do what's best for Maya. I just have to guide her toward the conclusion that this is for the best. I stared at that sentence for a long time. She's stable to him. My stability wasn't a virtue, it was a tool. It was a convenience that allowed him to lead a double life without any suspicion. My reliability, my ability to handle the crises at work and the chaos at home, was the very thing he was using to betray me. I was the infrastructure that supported his freedom. I was the road he drove on to get to her. I felt a surge of nausea, but I didn't let myself cry. Crying is a reaction to a shock, and I was past the point of shock. I was in the analysis phase. In HR, when you find out an executive has been embezzling from the company, you don't storm into their office and scream. You document every single transaction. You secure the evidence. You create a paper trail that is impossible to refute. You wait until you have all the leverage, and then you call them into a room with a witness present. I spent the next 3 hours downloading every single email, every photo, and every bank statement. I saved them to an encrypted external drive, and then I uploaded a backup to a secure cloud account that Mark didn't know existed. I felt a cold, clinical satisfaction as the progress bar moved across the screen. 10, 40, 80, complete. I believe we bought the dining table in 2012, or maybe 2013, right before we moved into this house. It was a heavy oak piece, something that felt permanent. I remember how Wed spent the whole afternoon assembling it, laughing about how Wed hosts Thanksgiving for the whole extended family. I looked at the table now, and it just looked like a piece of wood. It didn't represent a legacy or a promise. It was just an object taking up space in a room that was too expensive to heat. Mark came home at 6:30. He walked in and did his usual routine. He dropped his keys on the console, kissed my cheek, and asked if I'd seen his blue tie. "It's in the laundry room," I said. My voice sounded normal. Ed practiced it in my head. "Thanks, babe," he said. He walked into the kitchen and started pouring himself a glass of wine. Tough day. My boss is on another warpath about the Q4 projections. I swear, the man has no idea how to lead. I watched him from the doorway. I watched the way his throat moved when he swallowed. I watched the way he leaned against the counter, looking for all the world like a tired, hard-working father and husband. It was a performance. He was a professional actor, and I had been his only audience for 20 years. "How was your day?" he asked, though he didn't really wait for the answer. He was already checking his phone. I knew he was probably texting Sarah. I knew he was probably telling her how suffocating the evening was, or how he couldn't wait to be away from the beautiful cage. "It was fine," I said. "I spent some time organizing the files for the end-of-year reviews." "Good," he said, not looking up. "Keep it tight. You're always so good at that." I didn't say anything. I just went to the living room and sat on the sofa. Maya was in her room doing homework, and the house was quiet except for the sound of the wind rattling the window panes. I thought about the transition he and Sarah had planned. I thought about the secret account and the way he'd planned to guide me toward a conclusion that suited him. I realized then that I didn't want a mutual parting of ways. I didn't want to be taken care of by the man who saw my stability as a weakness. I started thinking about the law. I've dealt with enough employment contracts and severance packages to know that the details are everything. I didn't know the specifics of New York matrimonial law, but I knew how to find them. I knew how to find the most aggressive lawyer in the county, the kind of person who doesn't just negotiate a settlement, but dismantles the opposition. I spent the rest of the evening playing the part. I made dinner tacos because it was Tuesday, and Maya likes the man. I listened to him talk about his day. I smiled in the right places. I asked the right questions. I was the perfect stable wife. As we were cleaning up, I noticed a small chip in the rim of one of the plates. It was tiny, almost invisible, but it was there. I remember thinking that if you just keep using a chipped plate, eventually the crack spreads. One day, you're just holding it, and the whole thing just splits in half in your hands. That night, as Mark slept beside me, his breathing heavy and rhythmic, I stayed awake. I looked at the ceiling and thought about this secret account. I wondered how much was in there exactly. I wondered if Sarah knew that the money he was using to fund their adventure was the money that was supposed to be Maya's college fund. I felt a strange sense of detachment. It was like I had already left the marriage, and I was just observing the wreckage from a distance. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was just calculating. The next morning, I woke up at 5:30 a.m. I didn't make the coffee immediately. Instead, I went into the guest room. The room was cold, and the air smelled like old cardboard and dust. I looked at the spot where the briefcase had been. I wondered if Sarah was waking up right now in some apartment in the city, thinking about her transition to a new life. I wondered if she thought she was winning. I went back to the kitchen and started the coffee machine. As the smell of burnt beans filled the room, I took out my phone and sent a single email to a law firm I'd researched the night before. The subject line was simple: consultation request, high asset divorce. I didn't feel a rush of adrenaline. I didn't feel a sense of triumph. I just felt a quiet, cold clarity. Mark walked into the kitchen 10 minutes later, rubbing his eyes. He looked at me and gave me a small, tired smile. "Morning," he said. "Did you see my blue tie? I can't find it." "It's where it always is, Mark," I said. "In the laundry room. Right where I put it," he grunted and walked away. I stood there, watching the coffee drip into the pot, and I realized that for the first time in years, I wasn't worried about the draft in the hallway. I didn't care if the house was cold. In fact, I think I preferred it that way. The law office was in downtown Albany, one of those old brick buildings. Honestly, it just smelled like old paper and that citrus cleaner they use in offices that doesn't really work. I picked this lawyer, Alina Vance. Her website said she was aggressive, but when I actually met her, she just looked exhausted, like she'd seen way too many divorces and was just over it. Plus, the chair I was sitting in had one of those weird wobbles that drove me crazy the whole time. The lighting in the office was that harsh, flickering fluorescent kind that gives you a headache after 10 minutes. And there was this one coffee ring on the edge of the desk that Alina hadn't wiped away. It was just sitting there, drying into a sticky brown crust. I didn't even bring up the affair at first. I didn't tell her about Sarah or the hotels. I just handed her the project audit folder. I told her I wanted someone to go through everything, every joint accountant. I wanted to know exactly how to freeze the money the second he got the papers. Alina just flipped through the spreadsheets. She didn't do the whole "I'm so sorry" thing or offer me a tissue. She just tapped her pen and looked at the numbers. She told me already done the hard part. She said the transfers to that other account were dissipation of marital assets, which basically means since he spent joint money on a second life, the court might give me a bigger piece of what was left. I think I told her that he thinks I'm just there, like in part of the furniture. Alina told me to let him keep thinking that. She said the more he thinks I am just floating along in my routine, the less likely he is to move the rest of the money. She told me to just be the perfect wife for a while. Basically, stay quiet and let him get lazy. I left there feeling, I don't know. Not excited because I was too tired for that, but just like things were finally lining up. Wait, Was it October? No, it had to be November. The leaves were already brown and rotting on the sidewalks. When I got home, the house felt weird. Same two-story place, same drafty halls, same overpriced heating. Billy actually forgot to call the gas company about that overcharge last month. But it felt like I was visiting. I saw Mark had left crumbs all over the kitchen counter from some snack. Usually, I'd have cleaned that up immediately, just annoyed that he couldn't use a napkin. But I just looked at them and left them there. It didn't really matter. For the next couple of weeks, I just acted. I called it the maintenance phase, like something I do in HR. When you're firing someone, you don't start being mean to them right before, or they'll sue you. So I was just politely cold. I asked about his day. I listened to him complain about Q4 projections. I even suggested that new Italian place for our anniversary. He seemed relieved. I could tell he thought I'd gotten over whatever happened in the guest room. He started being all affectionate, which was honestly gross. He'd hug me from behind while I was doing the dishes, whispering about how much he appreciated my strength. I stood there for a minute with the soap on my hands, wondering how many times he'd done that after a weekend with Sarah. I think it was a Monday, or maybe Tuesday. The garbage trucks had already come. I was looking for the house deed in the den. I needed a copy of the mortgage for Alina. While I was digging, I found this stack of old appliance manuals. There was one for a microwave we threw away in 2008, and a thick one for a dishwasher that leaked and got replaced years ago. The dust in the den was getting out of hand. I could see the particles dancing in the light, and I knew the filter in the vent was probably clogged again. I really hated how the carpet in that corner had started to fray. I spent like 20 minutes just staring at the manuals. I got really annoyed that I'd even kept them. Why? Who was I protecting by keeping instructions for a machine that didn't exist? I wanted to rip them up, but I didn't. I just put them back and kept looking for the deed. The house was freezing, too. The vac was acting up again, and the upstairs felt like a freezer. Mark complained about it every day, but he never actually called the technician. He just liked to complain. He was wrapped in his navy bathrobe one night and was like, "Grace, it's freezing, we're paying $400 a month for this? It's ridiculous." I just told him I'd look into it without looking up from my laptop. I wasn't looking into the heat. I was looking at the asset list Alina sent. We were basically building a way to strip him of his confidence and a lot of his money. Maya was the hardest part. She's 15, and kids that age can tell when something is off. She started telling me I was acting weird. One afternoon, driving her to volleyball, she told me, "You're too nice. You're like a robot. You're doing the mom thing. But you're not actually here." I just gripped the wheel tighter and told her I was tired from work. "You're always tired," she muttered, looking out at all the same-looking lawns and Target signs. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to tell her her dad was a thief. But Alina said no talking until the papers were served. Otherwise, Mark might hide more money or try to get in Maya's head. So I just smiled and told her to drink enough water during her game. I felt like a jerk, but I had to. The following Friday, I met Alina again. We spent 3 hours on the dissipation claim. We had the evidence flights, jewelry, these consulting fees he paid Sarah that were obviously just gifts. I noticed Alina had a small piece of lint on her blazer. It was just a tiny white thread, but it was right there on her shoulder, and I couldn't stop looking at it while she talked. It was incredibly distracting. Alina was flipping through emails and told me he was arrogant. He'd actually written to Sarah about how he was managing me. She said that kind of ego makes her job easy because he thinks Hez the smartest person in the room. I told her I didn't just want the money. I wanted him to know I saw it all, that while he was calling me stable, I was the one auditing his whole life. Alina gave me this little smile. She said the serving of the papers is the final report. She told me the look on a man's face when he realizes has been outplayed is a great payment, but to stay focused on the security, not the revenge. I nodded, but I don't think I was looking for a small deal. When I got home that night, Mark was in the living room with a scotch, watching a game. He looked so comfortable, like he really thought he'd pulled this off. He looked at me and said, I was thinking maybe a weekend trip in February. Just us, maybe Florida to get away from the cold. I just stared at him. Florida. He probably had some connection there. Or he just wanted to play the loving husband on a beach. That sounds lovely, Mark, I said. I sounded exactly like the woman he thought I was. I went into the kitchen and made roast chicken. I spent forever chopping the carrots, making sure they were all exactly the same size. I just liked that I could control that one thing. While the chicken was in the oven, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the cloud account. Mark had tried to log into one of the shared folders I'd mirrored. He noticed something was missing, or he was just poking around. I didn't panic. I just closed the app. He was starting to notice. "Everything okay?" he asked, coming into the kitchen. He stood too close, his hand on my waist. "Just a work email about payroll taxes," I said. "You work too hard, Grace. You need to relax." I looked at him. Really looked at him. I saw the sag in his jaw, the way his eyes looked kind of empty. He wasn't some daring guy escaping a cage. He was just mediocre. He liked the power of lying to me while I did the laundry and handled the 401k. I realized I didn't even hate him. Hate takes too much energy. He was just a bad investment, a liability I needed to write off. That night, the wind was howling and the bedroom windows were rattling. I wondered if he and Sarah were texting right now, laughing about the stable wife sleeping 3 inches away from him. Wait, was it raining? No, just the wind hitting the glass. I felt this weird sense of power. For 20 years, I'd kept everything together. The bills, the kids, the social stuff. I built this life so I knew exactly where the weak spots were. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. I made coffee, it smelled slightly burnt, and looked at the fridge calendar. PTA meeting Thursday. Maya's dentist Friday. I picked Monday for the papers. I wanted him to be right in the middle of his work week when it happened. I wanted him to feel that specific kind of panic you get when you realize you've been fired from your own life. Mark walked in, yawning. He smiled at me. "Up early," he said. "Do we have any more organic eggs? I think we're out, in the fridge behind the orange juice," I said. He grunted and went to the fridge. I stood there for a minute, sipping my coffee, and waited for Monday. The rest of the weekend was just endurance. Saturday, I went to Target and bought stuff we didn't need. New towels, expensive candles, a fancy toaster. I wanted him to think I was in a spending mood, which usually meant I was happy. Just another layer of the act. While I was in Home Goods, I saw a woman who looked like Sarah. Same hair, same head tilt. My heart actually hammered against my ribs for a second. I stood there for a minute, clutching these white towels, staring at her. Then she turned around, and she was just some random lady looking at a lamp. I let out a breath and went to the checkout. I started thinking about our first apartment. I think it was 2003 or 2004. There was a huge blizzard and we were trapped for 3 days. We were broke. We ate canned soup and slept under 3 blankets. The soup was the cheap kind, the kind that tasted like salt and metal. I remember the label was peeling off in the damp air. It was honestly disgusting. He told me then that as long as we had each other, we didn't need anything else. I believed him for 2 decades. Now I see that us was just a convenient setup. I was the project manager, and he was the client who didn't actually want the building. He just liked that someone else was doing the work. Sunday night, we had dinner with the Millers. The usual, perfectly lit dining room, a meal that probably took hours to make. We talked about HOA rules for hedges and property taxes. Mark was in top form. Charming, witty, the devoted husband. He kept his hand on my back, whispering jokes in my ear. "Isn't Grace amazing?" he told the Millers. "I don't know how she does it all. She's the real engine of the family." I just smiled and thanked him. He was using me as a prop to make himself look more successful. On the drive home, it was quiet. Mark was humming to the radio, totally clueless that his world was ending in 36 hours. I looked at the dark trees passing by and thought about his transition plan with Sarah. He wanted a clean, managed exit. I wondered how he'd feel when the infrastructure just shut down. When we got home, I went to see Maya. She had her headphones on, staring at her laptop. She looks so much like me the same way she chews her lip when she's thinking. I love you, honey, I said, kissing her forehead. Love you too, Mom, she said, not looking up. I went into the bedroom and saw Mark taking off his tie. He looked tired but satisfied. He thought he'd won. I lay down and just counted the hours. Monday morning was gray and drizzling. The driveway was a muddy mess. I woke up at 6 point, made the coffee, packed Maya's lunch, told her to remember her volleyball shoes. Mark was checking emails on his tablet. He gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. Big day, he said. Meeting with the regional directors. Wish me luck. Good luck, Mark, I said. I watched him drive away. I didn't feel an adrenaline rush or anything. I just felt clear. I called Alina. He's at the office, I said. You can proceed. I didn't go to work right away. I went into the guest room and looked at the spot where the briefcase used to be. Then I walked to the hallway and looked at the gap under the front door, where the draft always comes through. I didn't try to block it with a towel. I stood there for a minute in the cold air and waited for the phone to ring.